Inna, my sunshine. How are you living in the apartment I gave you, Grandpa John? Sitting at a table in the Capitol Grill in downtown Chicago, raised his glass and smiled as warmly as if it were an ordinary family dinner, full of memories and laughter. His eyes, framed by wrinkles, sparkled with pride, and his gray beard trembled slightly when he took a sip. I hadn't seen my grandfather for 10 years. He lived abroad, and now he finally came back and threw me off track with his question. I froze. The fork with a piece of steak froze in the air, never reaching my mouth. The water in my glass trembled, reflecting the light of the crystal chandelier. The air in the room seemed to thicken, became heavy, like before a thunderstorm. Mom, sitting opposite, slowly lowered her spoon. Her carefully painted lips parted in surprise. Dad, sitting next to her, dropped his fork onto his plate. The clanging sound cut through the silence like a knife. My little sister Katie tore herself away from her iPhone. Her fingers hovered over the screen, and her usually indifferent gaze was now fixed on me. Even the waiter, passing by our table, slowed his pace, as if he sensed the tension. Apartment, I asked again, and my voice trembled. Despite all my efforts to seem calm, I put down my fork, placed it on the table, wiped my sweaty palms on the napkin on my lap, and looked at my grandfather. Grandpa John, I live in a rented basement. Grandfather's smile slowly faded, like a candle blown out by a gust of wind. His eyes, usually so lively, narrowed and his brows furrowed, forming a deep crease on his forehead. He set his wine glass down on the table, and the crystal clinked softly against the wooden surface. What do you mean? A basement, he asked. His voice was quiet, but there was steel in it that made me sit up straight. Grandpa John was always kind, but I knew when he spoke in that tone, the jokes were over. I swallowed, feeling the eyes of the entire family glued to me as if I were an exhibit in a museum. Mom looked at Dad. Her fingers nervously squeezed the edge of the white tablecloth. Dad stared at his plate, as if there were instructions written there on how to get out of this situation. Katie, it seemed, for the first time that evening, forgot about her Instagram stories and now looked at me with her mouth open. I've never received any apartment, I said louder, trying to keep my voice even, although inside everything was boiling. For 4 years now, I've been renting a semi-basement from a woman who smokes so much that the walls have turned yellow. The furnace hums next to the bed, and there are almost no windows, only narrow slits near the ceiling through which light barely penetrates. The silence became unbearable. I felt the blood pounding in my temples, my heart beating somewhere in my throat, drowning out all sounds. Grandpa John looked at me, then slowly turned his gaze to Dad. His fingers, clutching the edge of the tablecloth, turned white, and his knuckles stood out like those of a man ready for battle. Steve, he said, and each word fell like a stone. I gave you the money 4 years ago. 77 美元. 000. Said it was for Ina, for her new life after college. You said you arranged everything, that she lives in a cozy apartment downtown. Dad coughed, reached for a glass of water, but his hand was shaking so much that the water splashed on the tablecloth. He quickly wiped the stain with a napkin. But it didn't save him from Mom's gaze. She turned to him, her lips pressed into a thin line, and a mixture of horror and disbelief flashed in her eyes. Steve, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You said you helped her find a cozy apartment downtown. You showed me photos on Zillow. You said that she was happy. I looked at Dad, expecting him to say that it was a mistake, that he would explain that the money was stuck somewhere, that it was all a misunderstanding. But he was silent, and his silence was louder than any scream. His face, usually so confident, now seemed as gray as a concrete wall. "Dad," I said, and my voice was cold as a Chicago winter wind in January. "You gave me nothing. No apartment. No money. Not even advice on how to survive. You only said that I should work harder, that I was lazy, that I shouldn't expect handouts, and I didn't expect them. I worked 2 jobs to pay for this basement." Gatesy husped, covering her mouth with her hand. Her brightly manicured nails sparkled in the lamplight. Mom looked at Dad as if he were a stranger, and Grandpa John. He leaned back in his chair as if he had been hit. His face, always so open, was now a mask of pain and anger. "Inna," he began, but I interrupted. I felt something inside me that I had been holding back for years bursting. I wasn't going to say anything today. I didn't want to ruin your birthday, Grandpa John. But since we're all here, let's stop pretending that everything is fine. I'm tired of this. Tired of lies. Of silence. Of being invisible. I stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor, and the sound seemed deafening to me. "I'm leaving." I left the restaurant without looking back. I heard footsteps behind me. The clatter of dishes. Muffled voices. Someone, it seemed like my mother, called me. But I didn't stop. A fire was raging inside me. Not tears. Not weakness. But the rage I had suppressed for so long. I walked along the sidewalk. The cold wind of Chicago lashed my cheeks. But I didn't feel the cold. I felt that for the first time in years I had told the truth. In the parking garage, my grandfather's voice caught up with me. "Inna." Wait. Grandpa John was running. His coat fluttered in the wind, and his breath escaped in clouds of vapor. He looked older than he had at the table. His shoulders were slumped, and his eyes were full of pain. "You really didn't get an apartment," I shook my head, feeling my throat tighten. "I rent a basement from a woman who doesn't trust banks and demands cash. It smells of dampness and cigarettes. The bed is next to the furnace, and instead of a table I have a cardboard box. I eat sitting on the floor more often than at a table. There's almost no light, only through cracks near the ceiling. I've gotten used to it. But this isn't life. This is survival." He swallowed. His face turned gray. Like the concrete beneath our feet, he ran his hand through his beard, as if trying to collect his thoughts. "Your father said that you don't want help, that you're building your life on your own, that you're ungrateful, that you live in a dream world and don't even thank him." I laughed bitterly, and this laugh was harsh, almost alien. I didn't know what to thank him for. Once I asked him for a contact to find a job. He said, "Start with washing dishes. It builds character." And when I asked for help with rent, he said that I should manage on my own, that I was too spoiled. Grandpa John ran his hand over his face, as if trying to erase what he had heard. His fingers were shaking, and for the first time I noticed how much he had aged. "I want to see where you live," he said suddenly. His voice was firm despite the trembling. "Why?" I asked, surprised, crossing my arms over my chest. "Because if everything is as you say, and I believe you, then your father deceived not only you, but me as well. And I will not allow anyone to lie to me anymore." That same night, I drove my grandfather to my place. Chicago was ablaze with lights. The high-rises downtown shone like stars. But in my world, there was little light. We stopped at an old 3-story building in a rough neighborhood where every other streetlight worked and the sidewalk was cracked. I led him down the concrete steps to a basement door. The light above the entrance flickered, casting shadows on the peeling paint, and the steps were slippery with dampness. "Welcome to my palace," I said, opening the door. The smell of dampness and cigarettes hit my nose. As always. But today it seemed even more suffocating. I stepped inside, letting my grandfather through. Grandpa John entered. His footsteps echoed in the cramped space. He looked around. A battered sofa bought on Craigslist for $300. A crooked bookcase made from planks. A ceiling with mold stains. A bed pressed against a humming furnace. His gaze lingered on the cardboard box I used as a table and a stack of paper plates on the floor, next to which lay a dog-eared book. The only thing I allowed myself to buy. The narrow slits near the ceiling that I called windows let in the dim light of a street lamp, but it only served to emphasize the squalor of the room. He was silent for a few seconds, then sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress creaked under his weight. His sigh was so heavy that it seemed as if he had exhaled his entire life. "This is where you live," he said, not asking, but stating. His voice shook, but there was no weakness in it, only pain. "Since I graduated," I answered, crossing my arms to hide the way my fingers were shaking. 4 years. I worked as a waitress, then at a call center, sometimes cleaning houses, all to pay for this place. His eyes glistened, but he didn't let the tears fall. He ran his hand over his beard. His fingers froze, clutching the fabric of his coat. "Your father said he was saving the rest of the money for your wedding. I thought it was reasonable that you were living in a good place, and he was just looking after the future. There is no rest." My voice was flat, almost lifeless. Grandpa John looked at the floor, then back at me. His gaze was full of determination. "Enough," he said, standing up. His voice was as hard as granite. "Tomorrow we're going to Bank of America and my lawyer. And then your father will answer for everything." I nodded, but something inside me trembled. Not fear, not hope, but something in between, a feeling that I was no longer alone. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of burnt coffee and Grandpa John's voice on the phone. He stood in the hallway of my basement. His figure seemed too big for the cramped space. His voice was cold as ice, and I had never heard him speak like that. "I don't care that it's Sunday. Richard, find all the documents. I want to know where every dollar went. And prepare a letter that Steve no longer has the right to act on my behalf in financial matters. Yes. Right now." I stood barefoot on the cold concrete floor, listening. The t-shirt I'd slept in was old. The print faded, but I didn't feel vulnerable. For the first time in years, I felt like someone saw me. Not the Ina people thought was lazy or weak, but the real me. The one who fought even when no one else noticed. By midday, we were at Bank of America, downtown Chicago. The office was immaculately clean, with marble floors and the smell of expensive coffee. The banker, a woman in her 50s in a formal suit, was typing on her computer. Her lips were pursed, as if she already knew the news would be bad. "Here," she said, finally adjusting her glasses. "Wire transfer from your account. Mr. Johnson. To Steve Patterson. Marked as a gift for Ina for an apartment. 77 美元. 000. Date 4 years ago." She turned the monitor towards us. Date. Amount. Everything matched. And then she clicked again. And my heart sank. 5 days later. "Your father transferred the entire amount to another account under his name. No memo. No mention of your name. Nothing. The money wasn't spent. But it didn't reach you either. It just sat there. In his account, like a trophy." Grandpa John stared at the screen. His face was stony, but I could see his hands shaking. "Print this out," he said quietly. But his voice was such that the woman nodded immediately. "Everything. Every line." When she left, he turned to me. "He stole from you. He didn't spend it. But he hid it and lied to me. This isn't just a family quarrel. Ina, this is fraud." I nodded, but something was boiling inside me. I remembered how my dad looked at me when I asked for help. How he said that I should toughen up, that I was too weak for adulthood. While he kept my money, my chances, my life in his account. "Don't worry," Grandpa John added, putting his hand on my shoulder. "I'll figure it out." "No," I said quietly but firmly. "We'll figure it out." That same day, we went to my parents' house. I hadn't been there for years. The same two-story colonial in the suburbs of Chicago with a neat lawn and a white picket fence. The same house where I once baked cookies with my mother. Where my father taught me to ride a bike. Until he started brushing off my calls. Where Katie threw a party when I moved out and threw my boxes of books on the lawn because they were disturbing her friends. Grandpa John rang the doorbell. Dad opened it. His face was a mixture of irritation and surprise. Seeing both of us, he froze. His hand froze on the door handle. "We need to talk," said Grandpa. His voice was hard as granite. "I'm busy," Dad muttered. But Grandpa John interrupted. "Sit down." He didn't raise his voice, but there was something in his tone that made even Dad obey. He stepped back, letting us into the house. Mom stood in the doorway of the living room. Her eyes darted from me to Grandpa. Katie looked out from upstairs. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, but her eyes sparkled with curiosity, like a cat sensing prey. We sat down in the living room on the sofa that I remembered from my childhood. It was still soft, but now it seemed foreign. Grandpa John put a folder with documents on the coffee table. Dad didn't even look at it. His hands were clasped, and his gaze was fixed on the floor. Grandfather opened the folder and began. "You told me that Ina lives in the apartment I bought her. 77 yuan. 000 are my life savings, which I saved for years. But the money never reached her. You took it, hid it in your account, and lied to me and your daughter." Dad chuckled nervously. His fingers drummed on his knee. "Dad, you're blowing everything out of proportion. She lives in a basement." Grandpa barked, and his voice made everyone freeze. Even Katie, who was standing on the stairs, froze. Her iPhone dropped, clattering on the hardwood floor. "She works 2 jobs to pay for this hole. And you hid her money to keep it for yourself." "I kept it for her future," Dad began. His voice was tense, but I could see he was trying to wriggle out of it. Ina wasn't ready for such responsibility. I wanted her to learn to appreciate. "Don't.com. I interrupted, and my voice was sharp as a knife. "Don't, Lee. You said I was lazy, that I didn't deserve help. You made me feel worthless. While you kept my money, my chances, my life in your account. You didn't spend it, but you didn't give it back." Why, Mom whispered. Her voice was shaking. "Steve, tell me it's not true." Dad was silent. His jaw clenched. His eyes darted around the room. But he didn't look at me or Grandpa. Grandpa John pushed the papers toward him. "I spoke to my lawyer. We can sue. But you'll return every dollar and explain yourself to the family." Dad clenched his jaw, but didn't answer. Grandpa John turned to me. His gaze softened. "You're moving in with me next week. I've already called U-Haul. We'll find you a proper place. Don't argue." I looked at Dad. The one who said I'd never cope without him now looked small, cowering under the weight of the truth. I didn't feel like I had won. I felt like I was free. And that was better. The next Sunday dinner was in the same restaurant, at the same table. But everything was different. I sat next to Grandpa John at the head of the table. His hand brushed mine as we waited for the others to arrive. Dad walked in, and I barely recognized him. He looked older. His shoulders slumped, and the self-assurance he always carried himself with was gone. Mom walked beside him, her lips pressed together and her eyes red as if she had been crying all night. Katie put on her dark sunglasses as if she wanted to hide from what was happening, but her fingers were nervously fiddling with the hem of her sweater. Grandpa John stood up. not letting anyone start chatting about the weather or the menu. His figure, despite his age, seemed majestic, and his voice carried throughout the room, causing the waiter to freeze with the coffee pot in his hands. "I'll be brief," he said, his words sharp as a blade. "I've called you here because last week I learned of an injustice committed in my name. 4 years ago, I sent money, my life savings, to help Ina start her life. I was told she had received it, that she was thriving. It was a lie." The room fell silent. I felt my eyes burning. But I held back. It wasn't about tears. It was about the truth. Grandpa John continued. "Steve took the money, hid it in his account, didn't spend it, but didn't give it to Ina either. He made her feel unworthy, lazy, dependent, pretending to be a caring father. He lied to us all." Aunt Carol, sitting in the corner, gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. My cousin Mike blinked. His face became serious, as if he understood what was happening for the first time. Dad fidgeted in his chair, his fingers clutching his napkin. But he did not look at anyone. Grandpa John turned to him. "You betrayed us both. From now on, you will not receive a penny from my inheritance. Everything will be rewritten for others. And you will answer to everyone." He pulled a folded sheet of paper out of his jacket pocket and put it in front of Dad. "Read it out loud." Dad looked at the paper as if it were poison. His hands were shaking when he unfolded the sheet. His voice broke on every word, and I saw how hard it was for him. "To my family, I stole from my daughter Ina. I took the money that was meant for her future and hid it. I hurt her. My father and our family's honor. I take full responsibility and will return the entire amount within 6 months. I am truly sorry." When he finished, there was silence. No applause. No sighs. Just heavy breathing, as if the entire room had exhaled at once. I looked at my dad, and for the first time I didn't feel small. I felt seen. That my pain, my years of struggle were finally acknowledged. That night, standing on the porch of Grandpa John's house in Lincoln Park, I looked at the stars. Chicago was asleep. Its lights twinkled in the distance, and the sky was so clear that it seemed you could touch the stars. Grandpa was standing nearby. His coat was buttoned up, and his hands were stuffed in his pockets. "I still can't believe you never asked for anything," he said quietly. His voice was soft, almost guilty. "I was tired of asking," I replied, looking up at the stars. "I thought if I worked harder, if I proved myself worthy, someone would notice. But no one noticed except you." He nodded. His gaze was fixed on the horizon. "Forgive me for not checking earlier. I had to make sure the money got to you, and I don't regret it," I said after a pause, and my voice was firm. If things had been different, I wouldn't have known who was really on my side. Now I know." He smiled faintly. His eyes glittered in the streetlight. "You're not going back to that basement. I found you a place in Lincoln Park, with hardwood floors, with real windows, overlooking Lake Michigan." I laughed softly, and this laugh was light. "Real. It already sounds like a palace. You deserve it," he said, and there was such conviction in his voice that I believed him. Maybe I did deserve it. But most of all, I deserved to stop fighting for crumbs, for the right to be heard. The new apartment was on the 6th floor of a building with large windows from floor to ceiling. The first morning I woke up to sunlight pouring into the room like a river. There was no barking neighbor's dog, no creaking pipes, no smell of dampness, only silence, soft and warm, like a blanket. I sat on the edge of the new bed, not the old mattress, but a real bed with a wooden frame, and looked at the city. The sky above Chicago was so big that I wasn't used to it. It seemed endless. like my dreams that I had hidden for so long. That day, I did what I had been putting off for years. I opened my laptop and found an old folder hidden behind bills, resumes, and rejection letters. A folder labeled Interior Design. It contained sketches, floor plans, ideas I'd created at night when I couldn't sleep because of the furnace, drawings I'd shown my dad when I still believed he'd support me. He'd said, "Nice. But when will you become serious? Design isn't a job. It's a hobby." Now I'd become serious. I updated my portfolio, sent it to design studios, registered on Upwork and Fiverr, launched a small website. I used the money my dad returned not only for rent and living expenses, but also for the start. I bought a Wacom tablet, paid for courses on Adobe Creative Suite, invested in Google Ads for my portfolio. This was my chance, and I wasn't going to miss it. Weeks passed, then months. I worked nights, creating sketches for clients who found me through my website. My projects were simple: remodeling small apartments, designing children's rooms, decorating offices, but each of them was a step forward. I learned to talk to clients, defend my ideas, ask for decent payment. I learned to believe in myself. One day, I got a call. Chicago architectural firm Lakefront Design saw my work on Behance. They were launching an affordable housing project for young families and were looking for a designer who could turn small spaces into cozy and functional ones. "We need someone who understands how to live in a small space," said the director at the interview. A woman with thick-rimmed glasses and a kind smile. "Your work shows that you know how to make a small space feel like home." "I know exactly what that's like," I answered, looking into her eyes. "I lived in a semi-basement for 4 years. I know how to turn a corner into a bedroom and a cardboard box into a desk." She nodded, and I saw respect in her eyes. When I left their office with the contract in my hands, I was still wearing the coat that my mother had once called cheap and childish. Now it seemed perfect to me. It wasn't just a contract. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't the loser they thought I was. That a semi-basement didn't define who I was. That I could create, dream, live. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner party. Not in a restaurant. Not in someone else's house. But at home. In my new apartment, where it smelled of freshly brewed coffee and warm sourdough bread. The table was set with real plates that I had bought at Target. But they seemed more beautiful to me than any dishes in the restaurant. Light shone through the windows, reflected on the hardwood floor, and the laughter of the guests filled the room with warmth. Grandpa John brought a bouquet of sunflowers and put them in a vase that I bought with my first freelance payment. He looked at me with pride. His eyes sparkled, like the day he first saw my apartment. Mike, my cousin, who used to roll his eyes when I talked about design, now asked about color palettes, about how to choose paint to make a room seem bigger. Aunt Carol, who always kept quiet at family gatherings, suddenly said that she wanted to hire me to renovate her kitchen. Even Catesy, who usually sat on her phone, put it down and asked to see my portfolio on Instagram. Dad wasn't there. He returned the money on time, as he promised in his letter. 77美元. 000 came back to Grandpa John, and he used it to put a down payment on this apartment. But Dad's apology remained on paper. He called a couple of times, tried to explain that he wanted the best, that he was afraid I wouldn't cope. But I didn't want to listen, not because I was angry, but because I realized his words no longer had power over me. His absence was the best gift he could give me. As I passed the tray of appetizers, I caught Grandpa John's eye. He looked at me with a soft smile. His hand lay on the table, next to the vase with sunflowers. "This," he said quietly, so that only I could hear. "This is what I dreamed of when I sent that money. For you to truly live in a..." I touched his hand. My fingers were warm from the cup of coffee. Me too, I answered, and my voice was soft but confident. Me too. I looked at the guests, at the light pouring through the windows, at the sunflowers in the vase, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was at home. Not in the apartment, not in Chicago, but in my life, in the life that I had built myself, step by step, from the fragments of dreams and truth. Story 2. Alina walked up the steps to her apartment's front door, feeling strangely uneasy. All day long, she had been haunted by an inexplicable anxiety, as if a dark cloud were looming over her measured life. Usually, she trusted her inner voice. In 30 years of life, her intuition had never failed her. As a psychologist at a private clinic, she was used to reading people like open books, catching the slightest changes in their emotional state, anticipating their intentions. This gift helped her in her work with patients, making her one of the best specialists in the city. Today, she finished her workday for 2 hours. The last appointment was canceled earlier. The patient suddenly fell ill, and Alina decided to please her husband by unexpectedly appearing at home. In 2 years of marriage, she could not fully get used to the idea that she had her own family. Maxim was her first true love, the man with whom she decided to tie her life. The key turned in the lock unusually easily, and Alina was surprised. Usually, Maxim locked all the locks when he was home alone. In the hallway, she was greeted by an unusual silence. No sound from the TV. No music, which Maxim liked to play when he worked on his web design projects at home. Taking off her shoes, she walked to the living room and froze. On the coffee table lay women's things, a red handbag, which she had definitely seen before, and a thin gold bracelet. Her heart sank. The bracelet was a gift from their parents to their younger sister Christina for her 18th birthday. Alina moved slowly toward the bedroom. The door was slightly open, and muffled voices could be heard from within. Her legs felt like lead, but she forced herself to move closer. What she saw shattered her world into 1,000 pieces. On their family bed, among the rumpled sheets, and lay the 2 people closest to her, Maxim and Christina, her husband and her younger sister. They were so absorbed in each other that they did not notice her arrival. Alina stood as if petrified, unable to move, unable to breathe. Her gift, which had never failed her, was silent. How could she not feel it? How could she not notice the changes in her husband's behavior? The coldness in her sister's voice during their last conversations. Maxim noticed her first. He sat up abruptly in bed, and his face turned pale. Christina screamed, clutching the blanket to herself. Alina, Maxim began, but she raised her hand, stopping him. No need. Her voice sounded surprisingly calm, although everything inside was burning. Just don't. Christina slid off the bed, frantically pulling her dress over herself. Her usual impudence had disappeared somewhere. All that was left was a 19-year-old girl caught red-handed. Alina, it's not what you think, she began, but Alina only shook her head. It's exactly what I think. Christy. And even worse, Maxim got out of bed. Not embarrassed by his nail. There was no shame or remorse in his eyes, only irritation at being caught. Okay, he said, straightening his shoulders. I guess it's time to have an honest talk. Honestly, Alina felt anger boiling inside her. You want to have an honest talk, yes. Honestly, I cheated on you with your little sister because I haven't loved you for a long time. And you know what, I feel good with Christina. She's young, cheerful, doesn't lecture me about feelings, and doesn't analyze my every word like you do. Each of his words hit like a whip. Alina looked at the man she trusted, whom she loved, and didn't recognize him. How long, she asked quietly. 6 months, Maxim answered without a shadow of regret. Maybe more. I don't remember exactly. For 6 months? While she worked, helping people deal with their problems, making plans for a future together. Her husband and sister met behind her back. And you, she turned to Christina, who had been silent all this time. What do you say? Her sister raised her head, and something like a challenge flashed in her eyes. What should I say? That I'm sorry? Well, I am sorry. Maxim is unhappy with you. Alina, you are too correct. Too serious. He deserves more. He deserves more. Alina repeated slowly. And this is a big betrayal with a girl who is 10 years younger than him. I'm not a girl. Christina flared up. I'm 19. And I know what I want. And I want Maxim. Alina looked at both of them and suddenly felt all the anger disappear somewhere. Instead, there was a strange emptiness and a surprising relief. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. One she hadn't even noticed. You know what? Maxim, she said quietly. Thank you. Thank you for what he asked. Surprised. For showing me who you really are. For saving me from having to waste my life on you. She turned and walked towards the bedroom exit. Alina. Wait, Maxim called after her. We're adults. We can agree on anything. Agree. She turned around at the threshold. Agree on what? About how you'll continue to meet here while I'm not home? Or about how we'll divide the property? Well, the apartment is registered in my name, Maxim said with an unpleasant smile. And the car, too. So there's not much to divide. Alina nodded. Yes. He was right. The apartment was bought before the marriage with his money. The car is his, too. They even bought furniture, mostly with his money. Because he earned more. Okay. Then I'll just take my things and leave. She went into the dressing room and began to put the most necessary things into a large sports bag. Documents. Several sets of clothes. Cosmetics. Jewelry that she got from her grandmother. Nothing else belonged to her here. Maxim and Christina were still standing in the bedroom, watching her packing. Christina looked confused. Apparently, she expected a scandal. Tears. To attempts to get her husband back. Maxim seemed irritated by her calm. That's it, he asked when Alina closed her bag. You're just leaving. What am I supposed to do? Throw a fit? Beg you to stay. She picked up her bag and headed for the exit. You know, Maxim, I've been working with people for 8 years now. And during that time, I've learned one simple truth. If a person is capable of betrayal, then he deserves it. Both. In the hallway, she put on her shoes and jacket. Her hand shook as she opened the front door. But her voice remained firm. I wish you happiness, she said without turning around. And I hope that you get exactly what you deserve. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. Alina stood on the landing, clutching the handle of her bag tightly, trying to figure out what to do next. Where to go? To her friends, to a hotel, to her parents. How would she tell them that their youngest daughter was sleeping with her husband? How would she explain that their family idol had collapsed in one day? Her legs carried her down the stairs toward the exit of the house. It was cool outside. The October evening was coming early. Alina sat down on a bench in the yard and took out her phone. Maxim was the first on her contact list. She deleted his number without thinking. Then she found Christina and deleted her too. Let her sister find a way to explain to her parents what had happened. The phone rang. Her best friend Sveta called. Hi. Alinka. How are you? You sound strange. Sveta. Alina took a deep breath. Can I come over? I need a place to stay the night. Of course. When I come over. What happened? Did you have a fight with Maxim? Had a fight? That's putting it mildly. I left him. There was silence on the line. Seriously. Alina. What happened? I'll tell you when I get there. But first, I need to stop somewhere. Alina hung up and called a taxi. While she waited, she looked at the windows of her former apartment. The light was on the third floor. They were there now. Maxim and Christina. They were probably discussing how well everything had worked out. Strangely, she felt almost no pain. There was only emptiness and some kind of bewilderment. How could she be so wrong about people? How could her gift let her down? The taxi arrived quickly. The driver, an elderly man with kind eyes, helped her load her bag into the trunk. Where are we going? Daughter to Tverskaya. The Harmony Clinic. She needed to go to the office and pick up some documents. Tomorrow she would not be able to work as usual. She would need to reschedule several meetings. The journey took about 20 minutes. Alina sat in the back seat and looked out the window at the city lights floating by. Moscow was living its own life. People were rushing home to their families. And no one knew that her world had just collapsed. At the clinic, she went up to the 4th floor, where her office was located. The guard was surprised to see her so late. But after letting her in without asking any questions, Alina often stayed late at work. The office greeted her with its usual comfort. Soft chairs, bookshelves, paintings on the walls. She chose all of this herself, creating a space where people could feel safe. Here she helped others deal with their problems. But she herself was blind to her own. Alina sat down at the table and opened her diary. She had 5 meetings scheduled for tomorrow, and 4 more the day after. She needed to warn everyone. Reschedule. But how could she explain the reason? Say she had personal problems. She picked up her phone and started sending messages to patients, apologizing for the inconvenience and offering to reschedule the meetings. The mechanical work helped her not to think about what had happened. When the last message was sent, Alina leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. The silence of the office enveloped her. And for the first time during this terrible evening, she allowed herself to simply think. Maxim was right about one thing. She really was too serious. Too correct. She analyzed every conversation they had, tried to understand the motives of his actions, looked for hidden meanings where there were none. And he simply lived as he wanted. And he did not care about her feelings. But Christina, this was real pain. The younger sister she raised almost like a daughter after her grandmother died. The girl she helped with her studies, protected from her parents' lectures, loved with all her heart. "I'm not sorry," Christina said. And there was not a drop of regret in her eyes. Alina opened her eyes and looked at her hands. The wedding ring was still on her finger. She slowly took it off and placed it on the table. A small gold circle, a symbol of love and fidelity, which now meant nothing. The phone in her jacket pocket rang. Maxim's number appeared on the screen. Alina rejected the call and blocked the number. He called a few more times, but she did not answer. Then a message came from Christina. "Alina, let's talk. It's not as bad as it seems." Not as bad. Alina deleted the message without answering. It was getting on for 10:00 p.m. She needed to get to the light. Alina gathered the documents she might need. "I took a few books from the shelf for work tomorrow." She definitely wouldn't be in the mood. But at least she could read something to distract herself. As she went down in the elevator, she suddenly realized that for the first time in many years, she felt truly free. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it was scary. But free. No longer had to adjust to other people's moods. No need to analyze every word. No need to try to be the perfect wife for a man who did not appreciate her. It became even cooler outside. Alina pulled the hood of her jacket up and walked to the bus stop. She decided not to call a taxi. She wanted to take a short walk, breathe some fresh air, and get her thoughts in order. The metro ride to Sveta's house took about 40 minutes. Alina sat by the window and looked at her reflection in the dark glass. An ordinary face. An ordinary woman of 30. Nothing special. Maybe that's why Maxim found someone younger and brighter. No. She stopped herself. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't her fault that he was capable of betrayal. It wasn't her fault that her sister had chosen her husband over their family bond. There weren't many people in the carriage. An elderly woman with a shopping bag. A young couple quietly talking about something. A man in a suit, buried in his phone. Ordinary people going about their business and not knowing that the woman sitting next to them was the one whose life had just completely changed. Alina closed her eyes and tried to feel something. Before, she always felt the emotions of people around her as a light background. En implicite présence. Now there was none. As if her gift had disappeared somewhere along with her previous life. Maybe it was for the best? Maybe it was time to learn to live like a normal person, without constantly analyzing other people's feelings and motives. Sokolniki Station. Alina got out of the carriage and rose to the surface. Sveta's house was very close. A 5-minute walk from the metro. Her friend met her at the door with a cup of hot tea and a worried face. Alinka. What happened? You look terrible. Thank you for your support. Alina grinned, taking off her jacket. And this is what happened. She told Sveta everything from her unexpected return home to the conversation in the bedroom. The friend listened with her mouth open, occasionally shaking her head and clicking her tongue. Your mother, Sveta said when Alina finished her story. I always knew that Maxim was a slippery type, but not to that extent. And Christina. Well, she was always selfish. But this is beyond the pale. Do you know what amazes me most? Alina took a sip of tea. That I didn't feel anything. My gift failed me. Or maybe you just didn't want to see it. Sometimes we ignore, Theo. That we don't want to know. Even if it's on the surface. Alina thought about it. Maybe Sveta was right. Maybe there were some signs that she chose not to notice. Okay, said her friend. It doesn't matter now. The important thing is that you left him and did the right thing. You will live here as long as necessary. I have a spare room. It is comfortable. Sveta. Thank you very much. But I cannot stay with you for long. You need to find an apartment. Arrange your life anew. You will not go anywhere until you come to your senses normally. What about work? Tomorrow, I'll reschedule all my meetings. The day after tomorrow, too. It takes time to figure out what to do next. They talked for a while about practical things. Where to look for housing. How to file for divorce. What to do with mutual friends. Sveta was a practical woman and knew how to find a way out of any situation. By midnight, Alina finally felt tired. Sveta showed her the guest room. Brought fresh bed linen and a towel. Left alone, Alina sat on the bed and once again played the events of the day in her head. In the morning, she was a married woman with plans for the future. In the evening, a deceived wife who had to build her life anew. Strangely, there was no fear. There was sadness, resentment, disappointment, but not fear. As if something inside her was telling her that everything would be fine, that this was not the end, but the beginning of something new. She lay down on the bed and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be a new day, and she would greet it as a new person. A person who would no longer waste time on those who did not appreciate him. Alina woke up at 6:30 in the morning, from the bright sunlight breaking through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then her memory stung painfully. Yesterday had not been a nightmare. There was a pleasant silence in Sveta's guest room. A friend worked in a travel agency and left early, but always left notes with the daily routine and useful tips. On the kitchen table lay a note, Alinka. Coffee in the cupboard on the left. Bread in the bread bin. The fridge has everything you need. Call. If you need anything, I'll come back to the family. Hang in there. Sunshine. Sveta. Alina smiled, reading the familiar handwriting. It was good that she had such friends. She made coffee and sat by the window, watching the morning bustle in the yard. People were hurrying to work. Children were running to school with backpacks on their shoulders. Ordinary life went on. but she seemed to have fallen out of it, hanging between a past that no longer existed and a future that was not yet determined. The phone was silent. Neither Maxim nor Christina tried to contact her again. Apparently, they decided that everything had been said. At 9:00 a.m., Alina called the clinic and asked the administrator to reschedule all her appointments for the following week. Citing family circumstances, Elena, the administrator, was surprised. Alina never canceled appointments without a serious reason. After the conversation with the clinic, Alina felt a strange emptiness. What to do now? Where to go? How to live on? She decided to take a walk, putting on yesterday's clothes. She didn't have any other ones yet. She went outside. October, Moscow greeted her with a cold wind and yellow leaves under her feet. She wanted to walk far. Without thinking about the direction, her legs carried her along the familiar streets of the area where she had spent her childhood and youth. Here, 2 blocks from Sveta's house, her parents lived. Alina stopped at the entrance to her parents' house and looked for a long time at the familiar windows on the 5th floor. There, her mother was probably getting her father ready for work, and she was preparing for her lessons. She worked as a teacher at a nearby school. Should she get up and tell them what had happened? But how to explain that their younger daughter had destroyed the family of the older one? How to say that their son-in-law, whom they considered a good person, it turned out to be a traitor? Alina turned around and walked away. Not ready for this conversation. She needed time to figure out the situation herself. She walked along the streets, not paying attention to the direction, lost in her thoughts. Why didn't her gift work? Before, she always sensed lies, hidden motives, insincerity. And here, nothing. Maxim came home, kissed her, told her about his affairs, and she did not notice any falsehood. But what if the gift never existed? What if it was just self-hypnosis? The ability to observe, which she attributed to mystical abilities. The reflection was interrupted by a sharp squeal of brakes. Alina woke up and realized that she was standing in the middle of the roadway. A black SUV stopped a meter away from her, and an enraged driver leaned out of the window. What? Are you completely crazy? You're getting in front of the wheels. Sorry, Alina muttered, hastily retreating to the sidewalk. I didn't notice. But the car had already left. She was standing on the side of the road, shaking with fear. My God, she almost got hit by a car and didn't even notice how she ended up on the road. She needs to pull herself together. You can't do that. Alina looked around and realized that she had gone quite far from Sveta's house. She was in a business district among office buildings and shopping centers. There were a lot of people. Everyone was in a hurry, talking on the phones, solving their important matters. She sat down on a bench in a small park and took out her phone. 3 missed calls from an unknown number and 1 message, Alina. It's Mom. Christina said that there was a conflict between you. Come over. Let's talk. Mom. So, the sister has already reached her parents. I wonder what version of events she gave them. She probably presented everything as if Alina herself was to blame for what happened. Alina put her phone away, not answering messages until she was ready for a family showdown. It was getting close to lunchtime. She needed to eat something, but she had absolutely no appetite. She bought sandwiches and coffee at the nearest cafe. But the food seemed tasteless, like cardboard. A young couple was sitting at the next table. The guy was telling the girl something, and she was laughing, looking at him with loving eyes. Alina looked at them and remembered herself with Maxim 2 years ago. Then she also believed that they would be together forever, that their love was stronger than any obstacles. How naive. Excuse me, the waiter said to her. You won't finish your meal. Alina looked at the untouched sandwich and shook her head. No. Thank you. Can I get the bill? After leaving the cafe, she decided to walk around the mall, not to shop, just to take her mind off things. The shops were warm and cozy. Pleasant music was playing. People were choosing clothes and jewelry for their everyday lives. Alina stopped at the window of one of the shops. The mannequin was wearing a beautiful black dress. Elegant and stylish. She had never bought anything like that for herself. Maxim did not like it when she dressed too brightly or provocatively. "You are a psychologist," he said. "You should look respectable and modest. And now she can dress as she wants. Buy what she likes. Live as she thinks is right." This thought warmed her more than hot coffee. Alina went into the store and tried on the dress. It fit perfectly, emphasizing her figure and giving her confidence. She bought it without thinking, and at the same time took a few more sets of clothes. She could not live in one outfit. With shopping bags, she felt better, as if she was starting to arrange a new life with the simplest things. On the way back, her phone rang. It was her mother. "Alina, my daughter." "What's going on?" Christina came home in tears. She said, "You had a fight about Maxim." "Mom." "Not now. Please. I'm not ready to talk about this." "But Alina." "Mom, I'm a grown-up. I'll figure it out myself. I'll explain everything later." She hung up, feeling a pang of conscience. It wasn't her parents' fault that this had happened, but she simply couldn't stand their questions and attempts to reconcile the sisters. Returning to the light, Alina took a shower, changed into a new dress, and felt like a different person. In the mirror, an unfamiliar woman looked at her. Confident, stylish, beautiful. When was the last time she saw herself like this? Sveta returned from work around 7, loaded with bags of groceries. "Oh, what a beauty you are," her friend admired. Seeing Alina in a new dress, a completely different person, decided to start a new life with a new wardrobe. Alina smiled. "And what's in the bags?" "Decided to cook your favorite chicken with vegetables. And I bought some good wine. We'll celebrate your release." Over dinner, Sveta talked about her work, clients, and weekend plans. Ordinary life. Simply, yours. No dramas or betrayals. Alina listened and thought that she could live just as easily and without unnecessary worries. "You know," Sveta said, pouring wine, "we have a new vacancy at our agency. We need someone to work with clients. Psychology education would be a plus. Such clients often need a special approach. Are you suggesting that I change my profession? Not change, but expand my opportunities. The money is good. The schedule is flexible. Business trips to interesting places. Think about it." Alina thought about it. Working with people. Traveling. New impressions. Why not? At the clinic, she always stayed in the same place. I saw the same colleagues. Worked in the same office. Maybe it's time to change something. I'll think about it, she said. Thank you for the offer. The evening passed in pleasant conversation. They watched a comedy, drank wine, laughed at stupid jokes. Alina felt the tension of the last few days gradually fading. As she went to bed, she thought that the day had not gone as badly as she had expected. Yes, it was painful to remember what had happened. But she had coped. She had coped without hysterics, without trying to get her husband back, without humiliating her own dignity. Maybe she was stronger than she thought. On the morning of the second day, she was awakened by a phone call. An unknown number called. Hello, she answered sleepily. Hello, this is Elena from the clinic. Sorry to bother you so early, but we have a situation here. You have a very important client scheduled for today. He insists on meeting with you. The director asks if you can come. Alina looked at her. Watch 008. Elena, I asked you to reschedule all the meetings. I know, but this client is special. He is ready to pay double the fee for urgency. The director says that he is a very influential person. It is undesirable to refuse him. Alina sighed. She really needs money now. She will have to rent a rented apartment. Settle in anew. Okay. What time is it scheduled for? At 11 am? She had an hour and a half to get ready and get to the clinic. Alina quickly took a shower, put on a formal suit, and did a business hairdo. Work is work. No matter what personal problems beset her. The clinic had a normal atmosphere. Her colleagues greeted her, but did not ask about her absence yesterday. Elena handed her a folder with information about a new client. Daniel Volkov. Sancherwu, owner of tea company, Chitala, Alina. Reason for contacting: stress related to divorce and corporate problems. Standard situation. A successful businessman who cannot cope with personal problems. She had many of them. At exactly 11, a man entered her office. Tall, athletic, with dark hair and serious brown eyes. Dressed expensively, but not ostentatiously. He moved confidently, but his eyes showed fatigue. Daniel Volkov. He introduced himself, holding out his hand. Alina Morozova. Please sit down. He sat down in the chair opposite her desk, but did not relax. He held himself tensely, as if ready to get up and leave at any moment. Tell me what's bothering you. Alina began softly. Daniil was silent for a few seconds, studying her face. You know, I've never turned to psychologists. I thought it was a whim. But now the situation has gotten out of control. What situation exactly? I'm divorcing my wife. She's demanding half of the business and full custody of our son. I have every reason to believe that she's not acting alone. Alina nodded, making notes. That is, you are not worried about the divorce itself, but about its consequences? I am worried that I could lose my son. His voice became harsh. Arseny is only 5 years old. He should not suffer because of his mother's ambitions. There was pain in his words, which he tried to hide behind businesslike manner. Alina understood this herself, having recently gone through the betrayal of a loved one. Tell us more about your relationship with your wife. For the next half hour, Daniil talked about how his marriage was falling apart. His wife Victoria was gradually moving away from him, becoming cold and calculating. He thought that these were temporary difficulties, tried to improve the relationship. But she had already made her decision. And when did you realize that she wanted money and not to save the family? Alina asked when he learned that she had hired the best divorce lawyer in the city and was filing for property division. That was 3 months ago. Alina listened and felt something strange, as if this man's emotions resonated with her own experiences. The pain of betrayal, disappointment in a loved one, if fear of losing what is dear. For the first time in 2 days, her gift seemed to be returning. You said you suspected collusion, she said. What are your suspicions? Based on Daniil was silent. Then took out his phone and showed a photo. A private detective sent me this last night. The photo showed an elegant blonde, probably Victoria, in a restaurant with a man. Alina glanced at the picture and felt her heart skip a beat. The man was Maxim. Her Maxim was sitting at a table with Daniil's wife, and they were talking animatedly about something. Do you know this man? Daniil asked. Noticing her reaction, Alina looked up and met his gaze. There was understanding in it. He had also experienced betrayal and recognized in her face a reflection of his own pain. Yes, she said quietly. I know. This is my ex-husband. Silence hung in the office. Daniil looked at Alina, and she tried to cope with the shock of what she saw. Maxim and Victoria, her ex-husband, and this man's wife. What connections could there be between them? It's quite an unexpected coincidence. Daniil said slowly. Your ex-husband and my wife? When was this picture taken? Alina asked, trying to maintain her professional composure. The day before yesterday. In the Metropole restaurant. They had met there more than once. The day before yesterday. on the very day she caught Maxim with Christina, so he had more than one date that evening. "Mr. Volkov," Alina said, "I'm afraid I can't be your psychologist in this situation. It's a conflict of interest." Why? He leaned forward. "On the contrary, you're the only one who can understand my situation. We've both fallen victim to the same person." Alina shook her head. "I can't be objective. My personal experiences will interfere with my work. What if we approach this not as a psychologist and a patient, but as allies?" She looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" Daniil stood up and went to the window, looking at the bustle of the city below. "Your husband is clearly not dating my wife by chance. Victoria is not the type to have affairs for fun. She does everything with calculation. And if she's dating your husband, it's part of her divorce plan." Alina thought about it. Maxim worked as a web designer, but he had connections in different areas. Maybe Victoria is counting on using his contacts. Or maybe they're just dating, she suggested. People have affairs. No. Daniil shook his head decisively. "I've known Victoria for 12 years. She's not the type to fall in love. She's the type to use." His voice held the bitterness of a man who had learned the true face of a loved one too late. "And what do you suggest?" "Find out what they're planning and stop it." Alina was silent, considering the proposal. On the one hand, it was unprofessional. On the other hand, Maxim had already hurt her. And if he planned to hurt anyone else, especially a child. "I have conditions," she finally said. "We will only act legally. No revenge. No dirty tricks." "Agreed. I only need facts. And one more thing. If we do this, then everyone will go their separate ways. No commitments. No follow-ups." Daniil turned to her and smiled for the first time during the entire conversation. "It's coming." They agreed to meet in the evening at a cafe near the clinic to discuss the plan of action. Alina asked him to bring all the materials that the private detective had. After Daniil left, she sat in the chair for a long time, trying to understand what was happening to her. 3 days ago, her life was predictable and measured. And now she was planning something like a private investigation with an unknown man. But the strange thing is, for the first time in recent days, she felt alive, as if she had been pulled out of the gray fog of indifference into a world of bright colors and thrills. In the evening, Daniil was already waiting for her in the cafe. Having laid out several folders on the table, "Here's what we managed to find out," he said, when she sat down opposite him. They had been dating for about 3 months. Victoria always pays the bill in expensive restaurants. That is, she supports him. It looks like it. He also took her to meet some people. The detective took a photo of one of the meetings. Daniil showed a few more photos. In one of them, Maxim, Victoria and 2 other men in expensive suits were sitting in an office, obviously discussing business matters. "Do you know these people?" Alina asked. "Unfortunately, yes. They are Sergei Kravchenko and Andrei Belov. They tried to buy my company 2 years ago, but I refused. Very unpleasant types, ready to do anything for money." Alina began to understand the scale of the situation. This was not just betrayal, but a real conspiracy to take over Daniil's business. "And what does your lawyer know?" "My lawyer is good, but he plays by the rules. And here everyone breaks the rules except me. Then we need to collect evidence of this conspiracy. If it could be proven that the divorce was part of a business transaction, the court would take that into account." They spent the next 2 hours working out a plan. Alina was to try to contact Maxim and find out what he knew about Daniil's affairs. Daniil, meanwhile, would try to get more information about Victoria's meetings. "What about your son?" Alina asked. "Where is he now?" Daniil's face softened. "With my parents in the Moscow region. I don't want him to see my fights with Victoria. Arseny is a very sensitive boy. You see him often every weekend. He is the only good thing left from this marriage. There was such tenderness in his voice that Alina felt warmth in her chest. Maxim never spoke about future children like that. Moreover, he always avoided talking about this topic. They parted around 10 p.m. Alina returned to the light in high spirits. For the first time in recent days, she had something to do that completely captured her attention. "You seem different today," her friend noted. "More alive. Or something. I have an interesting project." Alina answered evasively. "I can't give you the details, but it's something new for me." The next day, she called Maxim from a blocked number. He didn't answer right away. "Hello, Maxim. It's me." There was silence on the line. "Alina. How are you?" "Fine. I wanted to talk about the divorce. We need to formalize our separation." "Yes. Of course. We can meet and discuss the details. How is Christina? Has she changed her mind yet?" "No. Everything is serious between us. We are even thinking about getting married." Alina felt a pang of pain, but continued the conversation in a calm tone. "I see. And how is work? I remember you talking about some big projects." "Yes. Things are going well. Interesting clients with big budgets have appeared. And not only that. Actually, corporate acquisitions are a very promising area right now. Many companies want to beautifully formalize the change of ownership. And good designers are needed here." Bingo. Maxim really worked on the acquisition of Daniil's company. "Sounds interesting. Well, okay. I'll think about the meeting and call back." After the conversation, Alina immediately wrote Daniil a message. "Your suspicions were confirmed. Maxim is working on a corporate takeover. Most likely, your company." The answer came in 5 minutes. "Thank you. I have news too. Let's meet this evening." They met in the same cafe. Daniil looked gloomy. "Victoria filed additional documents with the court today. Urgent consideration of the case on division of property. Motivates by the fact that I allegedly hide the company's assets. And you hide them, no. But she has some documents that confirm this." "Fake?" "Of course. But they look convincing." Alina thought about it. Maxim is a good designer. He could forge any documents so that you couldn't tell them apart from the real thing. It turns out that they are setting me up on all fronts. Victoria is going to court. And these two businessmen are preparing to intercept the devalued company. Not all is lost. We need to prove the connection between all the participants in the conspiracy." How Alina was silent for a moment, then said decisively, "I will meet with Maxim. I will try to extract information from him. This could be dangerous. He is my ex-husband, not a mafia member. The most he can do is be rude." The next day, Alina made an appointment with Maxim at a restaurant in the city center. She prepared herself carefully, put on a new red dress, did a stylish hairdo, and light makeup. She wanted him to see that she hadn't broken down after their breakup. Maxim arrived exactly at the appointed time. "Seeing here." He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You look good," he said, sitting down at the table. "Thank you. You look good too." Indeed. Maxim was dressed more expensively than usual. A new suit, an expensive watch that she had never seen before. Apparently, the new projects really brought in a good income. "So, are we going to file for divorce?" he asked. "Ordering wine." "Sure. But how are things in general? Work is going great. You know, I realized that I used to work at the wrong level. Now the clients are completely different. Serious. With big money. Tell me more." Maxim was clearly proud of his successes and happily talked about new projects. Alina listened, periodically asking leading questions. "And the most interesting project is the takeover of the company. The owner there has become completely spoiled. He thinks that he is irreplaceable. But in fact, he can easily be bypassed through the court and properly executed documents. And the owner's wife is aware of these plans. Victoria is very aware. She is a smart woman. Unlike... He stopped short. Unlike me. Maxim shrugged. You are too principled. And in business, principles are luxury. And how much will you get for this project? A percentage of the deal. If everything goes smoothly, it will be enough for an apartment and a better car. Alina nodded, memorizing every word. Maxim, intoxicated by success and wine, told more and more details. By the end of the evening, she had a complete picture of what was happening. Victoria, Maxim, and the two businessmen really were planning to take over Daniil's company. The divorce was only the first stage of the plan. You know what? Alina Maxim said when they said goodbye, maybe we rush the divorce. You've changed. You've become more interesting. Thank you. But it's late. It's cold. She replied. Some things can't be fixed. The next day, she gave Daniel the recording of the conversation. Thanks to her education in psychology, she knew how to record a conversation on a phone without anyone noticing. Is that enough? She asked. Daniil listened to the recording and smiled broadly for the first time since they met. More than enough. My lawyer will be delighted. A week later, the court rejected Victoria's claim for division of property, recognizing the existence of fraudulent actions on her part. Moreover, a criminal case was opened against all participants in the conspiracy. Maxim and Christina were summoned to the police to give evidence. Alina felt no gloating. Only relief that justice had been done. Thank you, Daniil said when they met to celebrate. Without you, I would have lost everything. We helped each other. Alina replied, and they agreed that after that, each would go their own way. What if I don't want to go my own way? She looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? Over these weeks, I have come to understand that you are an amazing woman. Strong, smart, principled, and beautiful. And I also think that there is something more between us than just a business partnership. Alina felt her heart begin to beat faster. Yes. During their time together, they really had a mutual understanding that she never had with Maxim. Daniil, I don't know. I need time to sort myself out. I'll wait. How long will it take? What about your son? He won't mind. Arseny loves good people. Are you a good person? Alina, a month later, they officially started dating. Arseny really accepted Alina. The boy immediately turned out to be as kind and open as his father. 6 months later, Daniil proposed to her. Simple, without pathos, during a walk with Arseny in the park. Do you want to become my wife and Arseny's mother? I do. Alina answered without thinking. The wedding was modest. Only the closest ones, Alina's parents, who finally learned the whole truth about Christina and Maxim, were happy for their daughter. Sveta was a witness and cried with joy more than the bride herself. A year later, they had a daughter, little Anechka, who became a younger sister for Arseny and a new joy for the whole family. Maxim and Christina received suspended sentences, but their marriage fell apart 6 months after the trial. Victoria was given a suspended sentence of 2 years for fraud. Alina sometimes recalled the day when her world collapsed due to the betrayal of her closest people, and every time she thought that it was the best thing that had ever happened to her, because it led her to true love, a real family, and true happiness. Her gift had returned, but now she used not only at work, but also in family life, to better understand her husband and children, to create an atmosphere of love and mutual understanding. And she also understood the main thing. Sometimes the most painful blows of fate turn out to be a door to a new, better life. You just need to find the strength to open this door. Thank you for listening to the end. If you found the story interesting, subscribe to the channel and like it so you don't miss new videos.